work on some cost-cutting ideas for this year. I know that's kind of at the forefront of a lot of people's minds. And so the way to do that is to improve nutrient use efficiency. So one of the big ones that we've talked about is capture the nutrients from crop residue, getting that residue to decompose quickly. Then one of the biggest bang for the buck that you get is putting biology on the seed. You know, Clint talked about the Endo 25 being about a $2 treatment on corn, maybe 4 to 6 on soybeans, depending on your seeding rate. Cut back on starter fertilizer, especially if your P levels are good and soil temperatures are warmer. We want to stay on the low end of nitrogen inputs. How do we do that? By split applying. Be ready to adjust in wet weather, though. We can aim for low nitrogen rates, but realize nitrogen is a moving target. If you have 10 inches of rain in May, it's going to take more nitrogen to grow a crop. So have a plan B if you've front loaded your nitrogen on the low end. Maintain soil tilth. That's just huge if you want to reduce inputs. That soil has to breathe so the microbes can function. And then keep the microbes fed. And that's carbon. We can add carbon through sugars and things, humic acid. But if we keep our plants well fed, the root exudates are going to do the majority of work of feeding the microbes. And then utilize plant testing in season, especially if you're staying on the low end of inputs. You want to make sure that you don't cheat the plant. So if we monitor it through the season, it gives us a chance to adjust. So, Clint's talked a lot about the 4 R's. How can we do this economically? Spoon feeding crops, putting nutrients on closer to the time that they're needed. Clint showed a lot of graphs where the nutrient demand just goes up like that. And in most crops, soybeans, it's at flowering stage, R1. Corn, it's during that rapid growth phase. So it doesn't really make sense to put your nutrients on in the fall when you don't need it for 8 months. So ways to spoon feed, banding fertilizer. We can avoid the tie-up in the soil if we band it and get more bang for our buck of what we apply. And that can be done in furrow, 2x2, side dress, strip till. And then grow more biology. Let the microbes help feed the crop. So bioenergy, again, is our flagship liquid product that we use to put diverse biology out there. I'm not going to dive into this too deep, but it has showed up very well in some plots we've had. Clint showed some of that earlier, up to a 40 bushel increase at North Carolina State. He showed this one earlier too, being part of a starter program on organic corn, gaining 13 bushels. Here's the work of Dr. Heininger again at North Carolina State. 2 gallons in furrow, added 46.9 bushels. What's interesting, they found over the years that even though a lot of their soils have high phosphorus because of all the hogs and chickens there in North Carolina, that to get a good crop, their standard practice is to apply 20 gallons of 10-20-7-0. And if they don't do that, they take a hit. Here you can see that the 20 gallons of that was about 20 bushels better than the check. But if you added 2 gallons of bioenergy to that, it was 28 bushels better yet. Here's a V6 foliar application, gained 20 bushels with 2 gallons of bioenergy. We talked a little bit about the induce putting on 2 ounces per acre, gained 18.2 bushels. And actually, from the research, it looks like V9 is a better time of application for the induce. But if you put the 2 on together, he got 28 bushels over the check. Bioenergy and on soybeans at NC State gained 13 bushels over the check in one case, and then with another additive gained 17 bushels per acre. Some work with Dr. Orslik at Penn State. These are onion bulbs, and he planted them in pots, and in the check only 10 of see, he put 28 bulbs. The check, 10 of them grew with the bioenergy, 18 grew. And here he had it on tomato plants in the greenhouse and saw a substantial difference. And one of the things he checked it against was a previous biological product that we had worked with. And his statement was, there's no doubt in my mind that bioenergy performed much better. So one reason to reduce purchase nitrogen is just the economics of the situation. As you know, whether you're organic or conventional, nitrogen is a big part of your crop budget. And then in some cases, there's a lack of manure availability, so that's another consideration. So nitrogen is the most important nutrient for growing a crop, and it's going to be the most limiting if you're deficient in it, especially in your grass crops. Every new cell begins with nitrogen. So it's going to take so much nitrogen to grow a bushel of corn. The question is, where are we going to get that nitrogen from? So some ways to stretch our nitrogen dollars, again, split applications, put it on closer to when the crop needs it. Anchor it with sulfur and carbon. That's going to make that nitrogen go longer. Sulfur can stabilize nitrogen from volatilization in surface applications. We don't generally recommend surface applications of nitrogen, but some growers put a portion of it on the surface, and putting something like ATS with it can prevent volatilization for up to 30 days. And then carbons also help to extend it and hold it in the profile. We've mentioned this before. Good soil tilth is essential if you want to get by on low rates of nitrogen. That soil has to breathe so the aerobic and nitrogen-fixing bacteria can function. So we want to inoculate the soils with nitrogen fixers, and our bioenergy has several different strains that have the ability to fix nitrogen. We've talked about calcium-magnesium ratios quite a bit today, and the importance of that. If we have more available calcium, we're going to have a soil with better tilth. If you don't have that, it's going to take more magnesium, more nitrogen to grow a crop. If you have a 25% magnesium in your soils, it's going to be hard to get by with low rates of nitrogen. So there's a lot of things that go into what is good nitrogen management. Obviously, crop rotation, if you're working with cover crops, residue management, especially with cover crops. I know a lot of people think cover crops are good, so the longer I let them grow, the better. But again, we got to get those carbon to nitrogen ratios narrowed before we plant a crop. That's why we need to start a residue management early, or else not let cover crops get too big. Then variety selection. There's a big difference in the way different hybrids utilize nitrogen and what point in the season they need nitrogen. So take that into consideration. Also planting date. You know, it's probably going to take less nitrogen on a June planted crop than it is an April planted crop. Weather and rainfall. Again, if we get periods of heavy rain where we have nitrogen loss, you may have to put more on than you planned. And then, you know, the soil management, managing air and water. So here's a corn nitrogen management ladder. It's just illustrating the point. If we split apply it, we can be more efficient. Yeah. At the bottom of the ladder, it's showing 1.3 pounds of nitrogen to grow a bushel with one broadcast application. If we just do a pre-plant nitrogen and a side dress band, we're down to 1 bushel or 1 pound of nitrogen to grow a bushel. And the top one at 0.8, splitting it into 4 different applications, we're down to 0.8. So again, split applying and spoon feeding the crop. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but the University of Illinois did research and they found that 67% of the nitrogen in corn came from the soil and not from applied fertilizer. So that kind of makes you think maybe we have had our nitrogen management backwards in the past. I think I'm going to skip over this one too.
So go back to the one. When you say so much of that nitrogen came from the soil, that's the nitrogen species the breakdown of the organic matter to release the nitrogen, or what are we missing there?
They actually test nitrogen, the different isotopes from it, and they can measure what's in the plant and where it came from. You know, did it come from nitrate nitrogen? Did it come from manure? Did it come from biology or whatever?
So here you're saying most guys are over 500, 130 pounds of nitrogen.
Right. So again, it takes so much nitrogen to grow a crop. Where are we going to get it from? You know, there's a lot of options. Maybe we can get 100 pounds from having good biology and good residue decomposition. We might gain 40 pounds depending on our crop rotation. If we grow a nitrogen fixing cover crop, we could get up to 100 pounds. You know, manures or compost, we might get 80 pounds or more, 200, whatever. And then band and foliar applications, 40 pounds. So again, we can't short the crop of nitrogen, but it doesn't all have to be purchased nitrogen. These different management practices contribute to that total that the crop needs. So how do we get the most out of your nitrogen dollar? Use more ammonium and less nitrate nitrogen. It's more efficient. Add sulfur from ATS, thiazole, ammonium sulfate, or potassium thiosulfate. We want 1 pound of sulfur for every 10 pounds of nitrogen. Add a carbon like a sugar or humic acid. It's going to hold the nitrogen in the profile better, and you'll get better uptake by the plant. And you're also going to feed the microbes. They're going to consume some of that nitrogen and give it up in a time release form. Adding potassium. If we have adequate potassium, the plant's going to use nitrogen more efficiently. And a lot of soils have trouble supplying potassium late in the season. And then add deficient micronutrients. Like Clint said, every one of those staves on the barrel is important. So if we're missing a micronutrient, that's going to hurt our efficiency too. And then again, add biology. You know, every trip across the field, make sure we have the microbes out there working for us. Roots need energy. Roots are not photosynthetic. They depend on photosynthetic energy from the leaves and the shoots. So we we need to keep that plant well maintained with nutrition so it can supply the roots. The amount of energy captured depends on the duration of light and the extent of stresses such as heat in the leaf surface area. So the energy the plant captures from photosynthesis and converted to sugars, roughly half of that goes to the roots and about half of that leaks out of the root to feed the microbes. So if we feed the plant, it's going to feed the microbes, and that sure helps on the nutrient use efficiency. So how much sugar do we need to add to our fertility program? Some companies promote adding gallons of it, but we want enough to just jumpstart the microbes, feeding them, and to stimulate the plant. There can be too much of a good thing. A 3-week-old corn plant has put 40% of its dry matter production out its roots. Think about that. How much dry matter is out there, and if we think adding 10 pounds of sugar is significant, it pales in comparison to what the roots are putting out of a healthy corn plant. So foliar feeding, we can make in-season corrections. If we're testing, we can add what is lacking. And the main thing that a foliar does is to stimulate the plant to put out more root exudates. Those root exudates feed the microbes feed the plant. So most of you guys are making multiple passes across the field, with different sprays. You might as well make your trip count like this guy did. If you're making the trip anyway, make the most of it. Feed the crop while you're doing it. This was me before I dyed my hair. That's the year I started working with Agri-Energy in 1988, and that was our high-tech meter we used to measure out all these products we were working with. What was that? That's just a shadow at that time.